Jeffrey Dahmer was bad, but have you heard of Granny Ripper? She allegedly murdered and ate 13 people. She was caught carrying her victims' remains in cooking pots.
The thing that is scarier than this guy's mugshot is the crime that he committed. Hi, my name is Ethan, and trigger warning, this is a dark case. In Woodstock, Illinois, 2009, Kyle Morgan lured a homeless man into his apartment, promising him food, shelter, and something to drink. A few weeks go by and police were actually called to the apartment due to a foul odor. Nothing in this world could have prepared police for what they were about to see. They discovered the homeless man on the floor with 666 carved into his forehead, and with his blood was satanic symbols all over the walls of the apartment. Kyle was later caught in a different state. However, he was a fighter and he tried to outrun police, but in the midst of that, he actually hit 2 people with his car. He pled guilty but stated that he was mentally ill and received 30 years in prison. Welcome to my top 10 worst kidnappings. Today is number 6. If you missed previous episodes, they are in the playlist. Colleen Stan was hitchhiking in Oregon to go to a party in California on May 19th, 1977. Colleen did state that she had let a few cars pass by just because they gave her weird vibes. However, she did accept a ride from Cameron Hooker, who was accompanied by his wife and newborn baby. Not long after she was in the car, she started to get those bad vibes again, and Cameron did pull a knife on her. Trigger warning, it's about to get dark. He then took Colleen to a box and put her in there for 7 years. Throughout those 7 years, she endured horrific torture. Now, I know what you're thinking, what the heck is the wife doing? This is what kind of annoys me, but after 7 years, Janice, which is Cameron's wife, had allegedly had doubts, and she helped Colleen escape under one condition, that she would not report her husband. Thankfully, Colleen said, "Screw you, Janice," and called authorities. Cameron was then sentenced to 105 years in prison. I will see you guys next time.
Have you guys heard of the Night Lady? This all started in Chihuahua, Mexico, 2009. Residents started noticing something really disturbing. You see, now some of the children in the area were going missing. I gotta grab some food for this one. Look at this beautiful roll. Now, with all the children around the area going missing, people started reporting seeing a woman. They said she would climb on the rooftops during the day, only to wait till night to sneak in through the window to snatch children. Police then sketched an image of what they believed to be the Night Lady. Only one child has been reported of actually escaping the Night Lady. You see, his parents had ran into the room and caught her just in time. She quickly then escaped and crawled out of the window. Wait, before I continue, let's say the Night Lady had taken you. Your third act has to come and save you. Who is it? Let me know who it is. Anyways, the kid that got away recounted waking up in the middle of the night and seeing the Night Lady standing over top of him, just watching him. People have brushed this off as just one big hoax until after midnight, a teenage girl had captured this photo. This is supposedly the Night Lady.
Things that bother you, they never bother me. I feel happy and fine.
I will be showing the video, but nonetheless, hi, my name is Ethan, and here's everything you need to know in under 1 minute. In September of 2017, 31-year-old Laura Wallen vanished into thin air. Her boyfriend Tyler Tessier had played the part of the worried boyfriend desperate for answers. However, he was living a double life. He had a fiance, and he feared that Laura would expose her pregnancy. The night of her unaliving, Laura texted her friend and stated, "Tyler has taken me to an open field in Damascus. I'm not sure why we're here, but it's in the middle of nowhere." Her body was found a few days later. Sam and Colby eventually uploaded a video where they were in the same area at the same time, and they captured a woman begging for help. Here's the video.
Did you get that?
Yeah, I got that. Somebody's screaming.
Someone's screaming bloody murder.
Whoa.
Guys, what the do you hear that?
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
My friend went missing at the McDonald's play place. I was playing hide and seek with my new friend Tyler. It was my turn to find him, and when I finished counting down and started looking for him, he was nowhere to be seen. I could have swore I checked everywhere. When I went back into the restaurant, I also didn't see him there. At that point, I assumed that he went home, but then I saw his mom outside, looking worried. But for some odd reason, she refused to call the cops. McDonald's still did so. Nothing was found, and no one reported seeing him leave the store. That was the last time he was seen. 25 years later, and I just got a bachelor's in hospitality management. I had a job lined up for me already at no other than my childhood McDonald's location as a manager. A lot has changed. On my first week, I was taking care of some paperwork in the restaurant, when all of a sudden, was that? When I looked to the direction of the sound, a shadow was staring at me. I guess I found him.
These serial killers got caught because of stupid mistakes they made. And I cover all sorts of true crime and spooky stuff here, so make sure you follow along. Dennis Rader was a prolific serial killer in Kansas from 1974 to 1991. He was called BTK, which stood for bind, torture, kill, because that's what he liked to do. But he also liked to taunt the police. He would send the police letters signed BTK, which could not be traced back to his real identity. So in the early 2000s, he had been dormant for over 10 years, but he still liked to taunt the police. And the early 2000s also brought new technology for communicating. So BTK, being the mad genius he was, wrote a letter to police asking if he sent them a floppy disk, would they be able to trace it back to him? And the police answered this letter basically saying, no, we totally can't do that. So BTK sends the police a floppy disk, and there is metadata on this floppy disk that says the last edit was done by someone named Dennis at Christ Lutheran Church. And then a 10-second Google search showed police that Dennis Rader was the president of the council at Christ Lutheran Church. Afterwards, the police basically came out and said that if Dennis had just kept his mouth shut and kept murdering, they probably would have never caught him. Let me know if you want more of these, because there's some other idiots out there.
She fell in love with her daughter and married her. This is Stephanie from Oklahoma, and I wasn't even looking for this story. I was researching something else, and I came across this, and I was like, clicking that link. So Stephanie lost custody of her kids when they were younger, and their paternal grandmother took over. Later, she got back into her kids' life, and then she says her and her daughter just hit it off. And this was after she married her son in 2008 and then got it annulled in 2010. She said that wasn't a actual, with an S, relationship. She just married him to get him out of the military. Don't understand how this works, but that's what she said. Now this son right here says he tried that mess with her, but he wasn't going for it. He denied her advances. DHS got involved. She was 44 here and she was 26, so I don't understand how this worked with the DHS. I don't know if there was a child in the home or what, but DHS got involved and they were charged with incest. They are now divorced. Well, the marriage has been annulled. Oh, and the mother says she feel like she didn't do nothing wrong because her name wasn't on her daughter's birth certificate. Honey, it's in the blood.
This man got sucked into a plane engine, and whatever you do, don't look up the video. This is the Air Astana 2004 incident, which is one of the most shocking and tragic events in the history of aviation. The victim was Igor Yefimov, and he was sucked into the plane's engine while he was working near the aircraft. The horrific incident occurred on July 13th, 2004, and it was captured on CCTV video. And the video has recently resurfaced on the internet, sparking renewed interest and curiosity among the viewers. Igor was a 26-year-old maintenance engineer, and he was preparing the aircraft for a flight from Moscow when the engine suddenly turned on and he was then sucked into the engine of the Boeing 737. Right when this happens, he completely disappears and blood and body parts go everywhere. All over the airport runway is bits and pieces of Igor, and it's an extremely disturbing sight. The video is extremely shocking and gory, and I really don't recommend looking it up. 1 second Igor was there, and the next he was just completely erased. I never really understood the power and how dangerous plane engines are until I saw this video. We all heard about wood chipping incidents and workplace incidents, but somebody getting sucked into a plane engine is definitely a first for me. Again, I want to say I don't recommend looking it up or watching it, but if you do, this is a massive trigger warning.
Explaining the backstory to viral videos.
While this may appear to be a seemingly innocent video of a boy dragging a trash can with a dog barking at it, what may surprise you is that inside of that trash can is the body of the boy's high school math teacher, Colleen Ritzer. And on October 22nd, 2013, she asked one of her students, Philip Chisholm, to talk to her after class. Philip had recently moved from Tennessee, and when Colleen brought this up in conversation, Philip got extremely upset, so she changed the conversation immediately. At around 3 o'clock, Miss Ritzer got up to go use the restroom, and a few minutes later, Philip followed behind her. It was there that he pulled out a box cutter and slit her throat 16 times before raping her. Philip calmly walked out of the bathroom and returned about 10 minutes later wearing a new set of clothes and carrying a trash bin alongside him. Security cameras outside of the school show Philip rolling the bin with her body into the woods. At this point, Colleen is barely alive. Philip dumps her body onto the ground and shoves a tree branch inside of her. He leaves the scene with his teacher's credit card and uses it to buy Taco Bell and go and see a Woody Allen movie. Philip Chisholm was caught later that night and was sentenced to 40 years in prison.
Phrases with disturbing origins, Part 2. The phrase bang for your buck was popularized in the 1950s to talk about warfare. The Eisenhower administration wanted something cheap but could cause a lot of damage. Drinking the Kool-Aid is a Jonestown reference. In 1977, Jim Jones moved him and his followers to a commune in the jungle where they could live in isolation. That is, until he organized a mass unaliving so they could all go to the afterlife together. He had his followers drink cyanide-laced Flavor Aid, which is basically off-brand Kool-Aid, but once he saw their painful and drawn-out deaths, he decided to use a firearm. A lot of people were forced to drink it while others drank it voluntarily. And the phrase drinking the Kool-Aid is used today to talk about someone who's blindly following someone else's ideas, or if they're just going along with what the popular opinion is. And this last one is extremely disturbing. In 1867, 8-year-old Fanny Adams was murdered and mutilated. Like a lot of true crime cases, this started off as a missing persons case until the residents of their English town banded together to go try to find her in the woods. The first piece they came across was her severed head on a stick. Her dismembered body parts have been scattered around the area and many pieces were never found. And flash forward to 2 years later when British soldiers were unhappy with the rations of meat they were given. They started to refer to this canned meat as the lost pieces of Fanny Adams that were never recovered. They would refer to this as Sweet Fanny Adams, and it's now a British expression. Despite its tragic origin, it's commonly referred to mean nothing. They'll say like, you're sitting around doing Sweet Fanny Adams, or they'll say you're sitting around doing Sweet FA. Drop a comment if you want a part 3.
This is the terrifying mystery of the Virginia Tech murders. Heidi Childs and David Metzler were childhood sweethearts. They grew up in Virginia and met through a church youth group and were inseparable by the time that they were at Virginia Tech College. Heidi was 18, and on the 26th of August 2009, she was super excited for an appointment the following day with a careers advisor. On the day in question, David had planned something really nice for her. He planned to take her out on a date to a field in Jefferson National Forest. The plan was they were going to hang out and play some music while the sun set. The location he picked is a lovely spot, but the fields are quite secluded. The couple got there at around 8:15, and what happened next is not clear. The following day at 8 AM, a dog walker found the couple's bodies. David was in the driver's seat of his car and there was glass all over the gravel by the door. He'd been shot. Heidi had also tragically been shot with a hunting rifle and was found outside of the car. Her bag, phone, ID, camera and lanyard were all missing. The first press conference revealed that DNA evidence had been collected, which was believed to be from the killer. There were also 6 cars identified that police were investigating further. However, tragically, this case has very much gone cold. Many believe that the couple may have stumbled upon something they shouldn't have seen and were then killed to keep them quiet. Another theory is that a poacher may have accidentally shot David and then shot Heidi to cover this up. I recently actually covered the case of the back-to-school killer Jesse Matthew, who was actively killing during this period of time in this area. However, this case doesn't seem to match Jesse's typical MO or motive. Unfortunately, this case remains unsolved to this day.
Sometimes true for stranger than fiction. The case of Richard Trenton Chase is a story which even the most depraved horror writer would struggle to create. Over the course of 4 weeks spanning across 1977 and 1978, Richard Chase took the lives of 6 innocent victims in Sacramento, California. His murders gradually progressed in violence, beginning with drive-by shootings and culminated in acts of cannibalism.
This is the bear video, one of the worst animal attacks caught on camera, explained. The local forest department of this village organized this bear hunt because of the bear attacks against humans in the area. The man in the video was tracking the bear for a while and even set up a trap, but he was ambushed and mauled. The victim's piercing screams alerted his colleagues, who would rush to the scene, and one of the victim's fellow hunters filmed the gruesome encounter. As you play the video, you see the man laid out on the floor wearing a green jacket with the female sloth bear on top of him. And immediately you hear the victim's awful screams, and these screams are way different from any of the screams you will ever hear. The camera zooms in and you see the bear has almost mounted the victim and has its jaws locked around the victim's face. And it seems the bear is going for the throat. Loud commotion can be heard in the background, and the crowd tries to stop the bear from attacking by firing their guns and throwing stones at it. As the victim wrestles underneath the bear, you see some of his injuries. His face and throat are covered in blood, and the ground is also stained with blood. You can see the bear bite his face and pull, ripping a piece of flesh from his face. The bear then shakes its head to get the blood off its face, and it then goes in for another bite, and this time, biting the man's throat and pulling away sharply, and it appears as a piece of flesh hanging from the victim's head. The video then ends as the mauling is still taking place. There's rumors that there's a longer version of this video, but I haven't seen it yet. According to reports, the attack lasted about 10 minutes until the bear was finally shot and killed, but the injuries the victim had would result in his death. I don't recommend looking for this video, mainly because of the graphic nature, but also because the screams of the victim are definitely the worst screams you will ever hear. Just imagine being attacked by a bear and being pinned down underneath it, while it just rips you apart and there's nothing you can do. The thought of that is just absolutely horrific. This man accidentally recorded his own death, and whatever you do, don't look up the video. For some people, deep waters scare the living hell out of them, but for others, it's kind of a thrill. And this is the case for 22-year-old diver Yuri Lipsky. He was a qualified scuba diver and he loved a challenge. And the blue hole, which is in the Red Sea of Egypt, presented quite a challenge. The underwater life is vibrant and colorful. The corals below are something out of a fantasy movie. To many divers, this is the dive of a lifetime. About 184 feet below the ocean's surface is something called the Arch, and it's a horizontal tunnel that leads from the vertical shaft of the blue hole to the open sea. And then the very bottom of this is a little over 300 feet deep. On April 28, 2000, Yuri Lipsky would begin his dive into the blue hole, and he would not come back alive. As part of the gear he was using, he had a camera strapped to him to record the beautiful journey. He also only brought 1 tank of oxygen and he had weights strapped to his sides. But what he doesn't know is about 7 minutes from now, he would be dead. He made it to the Arch, and from there he continued to go down. You can view the video of this whole thing on YouTube, but it's very uncontrolled, it's shaky, and honestly frightening after you know what happens. He would then land with a thud at the bottom of the blue hole, and at this point they believe he was suffering from nitrogen narcosis, which happens when you're breathing air under extremely high atmospheric pressure. And it also affects your higher functions. You begin to have these feelings of euphoria that basically creates a delusion that you're completely okay, but you're really not at all, and it also screws with your concentration. You have no idea what's going on and you don't know where you are. And for some reason, Yuri then removes his breathing apparatus. You hear Yuri gasping for air, and you can tell by the movements of the camera that he is thrashing back and forth for a breath. You can hear him literally struggling to breathe. And as you hear Yuri struggling to breathe and shaking all around, the camera then goes still, and this is the image where he died. This is just awful, and I really don't recommend watching the video of it. Rest in peace to Yuri Lipsky, and I really can't imagine going out like this.
Keris Yem was a young woman with her whole life ahead of her, but the shop assistant who lived locally was killed in the most horrifying way, described as an act of cannibalism. She had met 34-year-old fitness fanatic Matthew Williams through friends. He was a man with a violent past. Responding to reports of a disturbance, a single female police officer was the first to arrive here in the early hours of yesterday morning. What she saw was traumatic. Along with fellow officers who attended the scene, she's been offered counselling.
Matthew Williams had been living in this hostel after being released from prison a few months ago. He'd served almost half of a 5-year sentence after being convicted of assaulting a former girlfriend.
Tonight, questions are being asked about why a man with such a violent past was living in this residential community.
It was later determined that Keris's cause of death was sharp force trauma to the head and neck. She died as a result of external blood loss and internal bleeding. Home Office pathologist Richard Jones said he carried out the post-mortem on Keris's body and found 24 separate areas of injury, which included at least 89 separate injuries that he could count, which included blunt force trauma, biting, and cutting. He said there were injuries to the eyes, including the removal of the left eye, nose, ears, and mouth, with the injuries to the mouth being the most serious. Despite the bite marks and a large amount of blood around Matthew's face, the coroner claimed that Matthew didn't actually consume any of the flesh. Despite this, the attack was described as cannibalistic. Those who witnessed the attack would later say that Matthew appeared to be possessed, and that any attempts at reaching him were futile. Authorities believe that he was in the middle of a schizophrenic episode, made worse by the cocktail of substances and binge drinking in the days prior to the attack. In the aftermath of the horrific murder, an inquest into the events surrounding the tragic incident was held to determine whether or not the police were at fault for the death of Matthew. Matthew's mental health struggles and his interactions with mental health services, as well as his criminal history, were discussed. The inquest also delved into the events leading up to the fateful encounter between him and Keris. It was ultimately found that Matthew Williams met his end as a consequence of a sudden, unanticipated fatality due to the combined effects of substance use and resistance to restraint. Keris's family and her mother have said that the death of Keris is unbearable and described her as a kind and caring person that could always see the best in people. Matthew's mother, Sally Ann Williams, said her son had been diagnosed with schizophrenia after claiming he was a tree and saying that his food was poisoned. She said that after his release there was no mental health support whatsoever. He told her that he had been released without any medication. She added that Matthew had complained that the voices were back in the days before the killing.
This is the story of one of the largest kidnappings to ever happen in the United States. This is just going to be an overview. If you want all of the details and the full story, go listen to the latest episode of my podcast. On July 15th, 1976, in Chowchilla, California, bus driver Ed Ray picked up a group of 26 students after they went on a summer class field trip. As he was on the route home, he noticed a van stopped ahead, and he tried to maneuver around it, but when he realized it wasn't moving, he came to a stop. Then, 3 armed men got out of the van and forced their way inside the bus. They then drove the bus to meet up with another van and made all of the kids jump from the bus to 2 separate reinforced vans like this one. They then drove the kids and Ed around, locked in the back of these vans in the sweltering summer heat for 11 hours. One of the men also abandoned the bus in a drainage ditch and covered it in debris to try to conceal it. After driving around for 11 hours, they arrived at a rock quarry, which was about 100 miles away from Chowchilla. There, they forced Ed and the children to go into this underground truck trailer that they had buried 12 feet underground. Inside, they had put mattresses, some food and water, and turned the wheel wells into toilets. Once everybody was inside, they covered the top with a heavy metal object and then began piling dirt on top of it. And as you can see, the roof started caving in. Ed was doing everything he could to keep the younger children calm, some of which who were just 5 years old. After about 12 hours, Ed realized that they needed to do something to escape, so they stacked up the mattresses to reach the top. And that's when Ed, along with one of the oldest students, 14-year-old Michael, began trying to move whatever was on top of this hole. It turned out it was a manhole cover and 2 100-pound industrial batteries. Eventually, they were able to move it and were able to dig their way out. Ed then helped all of the kids escape, and they took off looking for help in the rock quarry. Eventually, they found someone who called police, and when police arrived, the kids were so happy. They took the kids to a local jail to be able to evaluate them and give them food and water, because this was the closest place that could house all of them. And eventually, the kids were taken back to Chowchilla to reunite with their parents. Ed Ray was an absolute hero, but the only problem was they did not know where or who the kidnappers were. Eventually, they started looking into the son of the owner of the rock quarry, Frederick Woods. And they discovered that him, along with 2 of his friends, Richard and James Schoenfeld, had recently been arrested and paroled. They got a search warrant for Woods' property and found this document that said plan that detailed exactly what they were doing. They also found this list of all of the kids' names that the kidnappers had written down. Go to part 2 for an explanation of why they did this.
Imagine being buried under a kitchen floor. This is the horrific true crime of Andrew Innes, requested by a follower. Back in 2020, Benny Lynn Burke, the 25-year-old Filipino mother, was sat at home, like many of us, during the lockdown in the UK. Her home was far from where she was raised. It was in Bristol in England. After heading to the UK a couple of years earlier from the Philippines back in 2019, Benny Lynn Burke was expecting a happy and new adventure with her husband, Lexington. They met in her homeland, fell in love, gotten married before making the big decision to leave her homeland and return to the UK with Lexington, a decision that would later leave her viciously mutilated. Her and her husband would have a beautiful little girl together, which they would name Jellica. Unfortunately, family life wasn't meant to be for the three of them, as it's claimed that Lexington became more aggressive since returning back to the UK, a different character to the one that Benny Lynn had met. The couple would decide to end their relationship mutually. Benny Lynn was now stuck in a foreign land to her, in Bristol, during a pandemic. The only little light she had was the little Jellica. She decided to try and meet someone new and joined a dating site called Filipinian Cupid. Initially looking to perhaps find another Filipinian to date, but instead she found a much older Scottish man named Andrew Innes. Andrew had smarts for sure. He had been at Aberdeen University. He was a computer gaming engineer. At 52 years old, however, he was over double Benny Lynn's age and had some baggage too. Allegedly had previously been married to a Japanese woman over in Japan where he had children with her too, before breaking up and then being deported back to the UK. A similar story to Benny Lynn's in a sense. At first, Benny Lynn was a bit put off by this, but over time she started to think on it. Probably with the loneliness in her life as well, she decided to give love another chance. Big mistake. They'd strike up a relationship online at first, and apparently Andrew had even offered a £1,000 a month job to Benny Lynn. She didn't want to leave Bristol where she had settled, but Andrew wanted her and Jellica in Dundee, Scotland with him. A whopping 440 miles separated the pair. 18th of February 2021, the couple would decide to meet and Benny Lynn would get a chance to see the sights of Dundee. Little 2-year-old Jellica would come along too. A couple of weeks later, there had been no sign of Benny Lynn Burke and her daughter Jellica. Benny Lynn's sister had tried to contact her and at first was greeted with text message replies, but then started to get responses from Andrew instead. It said that she demanded a video with Benny Lynn and instead all she received was an old one. Andrew Innes had palmed this off. He claimed that she had gone off with another man near Glasgow and he hadn't seen her since. Lexington, Benny Lynn's ex, had also tried to contact her for his custody visit of Jellica with 2 text messages and a missed call. There's talks that Andrew had claimed that Lexington was trying to take Jellica from Benny Lynn, so Benny Lynn had shut off her phone and fled. So this couldn't happen. It was all sounding very suspicious and Shella, the sister, was extremely and rightfully worried. The police were soon in action. They had a missing 25-year-old and 2-year-old. At first they tried to gain access to Andrew's residence but he refused. March the 5th, 2 weeks after Benny Lynn and Jellica had gone with Andrew, they managed to track Andrew Innes' vehicle doing that long distance to and from Bristol. That same vehicle was sat on his Troon Avenue driveway. With this evidence now pointing directly at Andrew, they decided to proceed and question him. Notably, there was a 7-year-old young girl sat on the sofa in the living room watching cartoons. Andrew Innes stated that this was his daughter.